Have you ever felt like the world shifted beneath your feet and everything that once made sense now feels empty? In the quiet aftermath of spiritual awakening, there's a strange kind of silence that follows the revelation of truth. It's a silence that feels sacred at first, as if stepping out of a burning building into fresh air. But soon, that silence becomes unsettling. The clarity you expected, the fire you imagined, is replaced by a void, a quiet ache that whispers, "Who am I now?" What happens when the mask you once wore dissolves and you're left with nothing but your true essence? This isn't a failure. It's a sacred pause, a liminal space between the death of your old self and the birth of the real you. It's not the end, but the beginning of a deeper alignment. This moment, though silent and still, is where the soul's true journey begins. If you're here, it's because you're no longer the person you used to be. And maybe, just maybe, you're ready to embrace the truth of who you are becoming. Stay with me, because we're about to unravel the mystery of this transformation. How letting go of the old can lead to the most profound awakening. If you're enjoying this journey, I invite you to subscribe as we dive deeper into the sacred process of becoming whole. Let's explore together the silence after the revelation. Have you ever experienced the silence after a revelation? The moment when, after seeing the truth, everything around you seems to crumble and emptiness begins to fill the space? Spiritual awakening is not as we are told. It is expected that after seeing the truth, a sense of clarity will follow. But what many don't realize is that often, after the revelation, there is an emptiness. This emptiness can manifest in various ways. For some, it is a deep silence that arises after the destruction of old certainties. For others, it is a sense of loss, as if the ground were being ripped from beneath their feet. For a long time, the world and your life were based on a belief system and patterns you thought were unquestionable. But now, everything has unraveled. This emptiness should not be seen as a sign of failure. On the contrary, it is a sign that you have undergone a radical transformation. The breaking of old beliefs, the deconstruction of the ego, makes space for the new. But the new has not yet appeared. What remains is the empty space where the old ways of thinking and being once held their place. Think of a moment when an old belief or identity you had was shattered. It could be something like losing a job, the end of a relationship, or even an internal discovery about yourself. That feeling of being lost is the perfect moment for internal reflection. For it is in this emptiness that the greatest transformation occurs. This moment of not knowing is precious because it is here that you begin to ask yourself, who am I beyond this? It is an opportunity for rebirth, where the soul begins to reposition itself at the center of its own existence. If all the old certainties you have were to dissolve tomorrow, what would remain truly within you? Emptiness is not failure, it is rebirth. What do you do when you realize that everything you used to do, everything you fought for, no longer makes sense? The journey of ego disintegration can be confusing and often painful. When you realize that everything you've done in the past no longer holds value for the new you that is emerging, you might feel like you're failing. But the emptiness you feel is not a failure. It is the space created when something old disappears so that something new can be born. The process of rebirth is often silent and invisible to those looking from the outside. But inside of you, a deep transformation is occurring. Remember that emptiness is an essential part of transformation. Just as the earth must be prepared before a new planting, The internal emptiness is the soil where the new self will begin to grow. This period may feel like a hiatus between who you were and who you are about to become. It is a necessary pause where you rest from the weight of old expectations, old roles you played, and wait for the new energy that is coming. Imagine you decided to change careers after years of working in a field that no longer satisfied you. In the first few months, you may feel directionless, without a clear purpose. But this feeling of uncertainty is the fertile soil for creating a new path, one that is more aligned with your true essence. Are you willing to surrender to the transition process, even if you don't know where it will take you? Detachment and the release of the old self. Can you feel the weight of expectations falling from your shoulders? What happens when you finally let go of the need to please and prove yourself to others? Detachment is not a simple thing. Throughout life, the need to please others, to fit into the expectations of your family, friends, or society, shapes who you are. During the process of spiritual awakening, this weight begins to fall away. The ego, which always sought external approval, begins to be dismantled. And with that, you start to realize that the things you fought for and what you once thought was important no longer resonate with your soul. Releasing the old self is an experience of freedom, but also of uncertainty. When you stop worrying about external approval, you begin to live in a more authentic way, but also in a more vulnerable way. This process can be painful, because it involves abandoning the identities you created to protect yourself. However, as the ego dissolves, you begin to see life from a purer and deeper perspective. It may be that you invested years in a relationship or career that was more based on external expectations than on your own desires. By letting go of this attachment, you may feel lost, but also lighter. This detachment does not mean the absence of love or passion, but the freedom to be who you are without depending on others' approval. What are the identities you still carry that do not reflect your true self? What would happen if you let go of them now? The negredo, the process of psychological death. Have you ever felt as if you were being deconstructed from the inside without knowing what comes next? This is one of the most challenging moments of the entire process. Jung's negredo is the phase where the ego seems to be completely dissolved. The old you, the one who sought approval, success, and recognition, disappears. But what comes after? This space of uncertainty and darkness can seem frightening. The feeling of being lost and without direction is one of the strongest in this phase. However, it is important to understand that this disintegration of the ego is an opportunity for transformation. The ego does not disappear suddenly, but goes through a process of disorientation, where the old pillars of security no longer serve. And it is in this empty space that the new begins to emerge. You start to realize that you no longer need external validation to exist. You begin to reconnect with a purer and more authentic essence. During the pandemic, many people felt this negredo phase. The routine, commitments, and even external motivations that usually guided their lives disappeared. This emptiness created deep fear, but also provided an opportunity for internal reconfiguration. Some people discovered new paths, new ways of living. When was the last time you experienced an internal death, a deep loss or transformation? What did you learn about yourself during that process? The soul's calling, finding the true self. Are you starting to realize that the answers are no longer in what you do, but in who you are? As the ego dissolves, something deeper begins to emerge, the voice of the soul. The soul has always been there, but it was often muffled by the ego, by expectations, and by fears. Spiritual awakening reveals this silent voice that now begins to guide you more clearly. What once seemed like an incessant quest for external goals and achievements now transforms into an internal search for meaning. The calling of the soul is a sense of deep alignment with your true essence. It is no longer a search for more achievements, but for more truth. You begin to realize that life is not about fulfilling dreams imposed by the ego, but about living according to your inner truth. This is the true purpose of individuation, according to Jung, to live in harmony with the self, rather than pursue an external ideal. Imagine that you spent years seeking recognition and professional success, but deep down, you always felt something was missing. Now, as you connect with your soul, you feel a deeper satisfaction in the small things, in connecting with others, in the beauty of simple things. This is the soul's search, not the pursuit of more, but the pursuit of the true. What would you do if you no longer had to prove anything to anyone? How would your life change if you lived only to express your truth? In alignment with the self, the symbolic life. Have you ever stopped to notice that, as you detach from who you were, you begin to align with something greater, something truer? After passing through the phase of ego disintegration, you begin to enter a new space, where the chaos of the old self gives way to a new internal harmony. The process of aligning with the self. This is the process of aligning with the self, the deepest center of your psyche. The self is not just a better version of who you were. It is a discovery of what you are in your purest essence. As you align with the self, you realize that life is no longer about achieving superficial goals or meeting external expectations. Instead, you begin to live in a more symbolic way, where every moment and every experience holds a deeper meaning. You start to notice patterns, synchronicities, and symbols that guide your journey. These signs, often subtle, are the language of the universe, a direct communication with your unconscious, a form of internal guidance. The symbolic life is not an escape from reality, but a new way of being present in it. As you attune to the self, you begin to realize that true peace does not come from controlling life, but from surrendering to it, trusting that everything that happens has a purpose. When you align with the self, you often start to notice synchronicities in your life. For example, you may begin to hear a song that has always had meaning for you, exactly when you are going through an important change. These moments are not coincidences. They are symbolic messages showing that you are on the right path. Have you been noticing the signs around you? How can you start to recognize the symbols in your daily life and interpret them as guides from your deeper self? The transformation of motivation, from ambition to inner alignment. Have you ever felt that the motivation that used to drive you no longer satisfies you? What happens when your drive to act changes from a pursuit of recognition to a deep desire for inner alignment? The most profound change that occurs during the process of individuation is the transformation of motivation. For most of our lives, we are driven by external forces, the desire to be successful, recognized, admired. These forces move the ego, and the ego always seeks more, always seeks validation. However, as the ego dissolves, this motivation begins to change. What was once an insatiable desire for more external achievements now transforms into a quiet, deeper longing, the desire to live in total alignment with the self. This new motivation does not come with haste, anxiety, or the need for approval. It arises from within, like a soft but constant impulse. Internal motivation does not seek fame or success, but rather truth and authenticity. It moves you to act, not because you have to, but because you cannot help but be who you truly are. This process can be unsettling because the motivation you once knew no longer exists. The ambition that once drove you now seems like a distant shadow, and what remains is the desire to be present, to be real, to be true. Imagine that you spent years in a career that demanded a lot from you, but no longer satisfied you. During the awakening process, you may begin to realize that your motivation to continue in this career is gone. Instead, you feel the desire to do something more aligned with your inner truth, even if it does not bring immediate recognition. Are you ready to act without the need for external validation? What would your life be like if you were driven only by your own inner truth? The process of detachment and the release of the old self. What happens when you decide to detach from everything you thought you were, to allow yourself to be who you really are? Releasing the old self is not a process of rejection, but of accepting what no longer serves you. You are not abandoning your experiences, your memories, or the aspects of your identity that defined you in the past. You are simply allowing them to take a new place in your life, without the weight of defining who you are. The old self, the old beliefs, and patterns of behavior have their place, but you are no longer limited by them. This detachment is a form of liberation, a liberation that does not come from denial, but from understanding. You understand that these old ways of being were necessary at a certain time, but now they no longer have space to grow in your life. Detachment becomes the first step toward living authentically. It is no longer about achieving the ideal image you or others had of you, but about being who you truly are. You allow yourself to live without the pressure of fitting in or pleasing others. And in this way, you find peace that comes from within, which does not depend on external validation, but on the certainty of being true to yourself. During the awakening process, you may begin to notice how old relationships, commitments, and even certain habits no longer resonate with your essence. It may be a friendship that no longer serves you, a job that no longer satisfies you, or even a worldview that you no longer share. Releasing these aspects is not a loss, but a way of making space for the new you to flourish. What aspects of your life are you still holding on to because you feel obligated to keep them? What would happen if you released them now, allowing something new to enter? The Negredo phase, the ego dissolving. Have you ever felt as if you were in a phase of disintegration where nothing makes sense anymore, and you no longer know who you are or what to do? The individuation process, as described by Jung, goes through a phase of deep disintegration called Negredo. The ego, with all its defense mechanisms, certainties, and identities, begins to dissolve. You may feel as if you are crumbling, as if you are losing control over your own life. This is terrifying because the identity you have built over the years is being dissolved, and for a moment, you find yourself lost, not knowing who you really are. But this disintegration is not the end. It is just the preparation for the birth of something new. The Negredo is the phase that, although it may seem dark and chaotic, is essential for renewal. During this period, you begin to realize that what you thought was yourself was not your true self. It was just an ego construction, a collection of experiences and external influences. Imagine that you have always defined yourself by your career. Your identity was tied to what you did. During the awakening process, this identity begins to crumble. The temporary loss of who you thought you were, this feeling of emptiness, is part of the ego deconstruction process that will allow you to realize who you really are, beyond labels and expectations. Have you ever felt disoriented, as if you were lost and without direction? How can you embrace this process without resisting it? allowing the new you to emerge. The journey of individuation. Now you find yourself in a new space. It is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of the true you. Are you ready to accept this transformation? The process of individuation, as Jung describes, is a continuous journey of self-knowledge and transformation. It is not a destination, but a path. As you reconnect with the self and begin to live a life more aligned with your true essence, you realize that this process never ends. Each phase of transformation leads to new revelations and new opportunities to live more authentically. You are in a new space now. You are not lost, but in the process of rediscovering yourself. By releasing the ego, you open the door to the true you, a more authentic, deeper being, more connected to your own truth. If you feel touched by this transformation process, share your experiences in the comments. If you have not subscribed yet, join us on this journey of individuation. Let's continue walking together towards our true self.